It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome back to the Douglas Coleman Show, James Pratt. Hi, James. Welcome back.
Douglas, thank you very much for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure. The last time you were on, I think we just kind of ran out of time, and I asked you if you wanted to come back, and you said yes, so thank you. I'm glad you're here. Also, the last time you were on, Malibu Crush had not released yet. Is it out now?
Yeah, so that was a little stressful, kind of like pressure cooker. But yeah, the Australian premiere was the 6th of September, and then it got released on the 7th. So Australia, New Zealand, for anyone down there, it's basically, out. And then the 7th of September, Malibu Crush started playing at the Chinese Theatre in Hollywood.
Oh, great.
And it just, the 15th was the last session that it played. It was just basically a short run, and it is currently out in Australia. It's online in the US, and for some reason it came out in Brazil like end of last year, which the distributor was saying is fine, but we only just found that out because they're actually using different artwork for the film there. So
I'm looking at the IMDb, 24 award wins, and 15 nominations already? That's amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, actually, this is probably the last sort of brag I'll do, but yeah, we actually finished the Chinese theater session that week and found out as well that we won the Silicon Beach Film Festival. We were really lucky to win the Silicon Beach Film Festival on the 15th. Which was another one, Best International Feature Film. Still doing really well with the festivals.
Well, I'm looking at one particular one. It says Cannes Film Festival Award, Best Director Feature Film, and that's pretty impressive. And what I find funny about that is that in the interview we did before, in part one, you said you didn't want to direct this film because you starred in it. And,
yes.
Maybe you should try doing more things you don't want to do.
Well, the irony in the situation there too is I think I might have mentioned we wanted another director. Like it's just COVID meant that he had to kind of take a full-time job directing commercials. So I guess it's one of those things where if he hadn't taken that other job and we wanted to just make it, I wouldn't have ever jumped in the director's seat. So maybe I have him to thank as well.
Like I said, I haven't seen the film, and thank you for offering to send the screener. I will definitely watch it because it looked very funny. Is there anything I should know about the film? I mean, do you get naked in it or anything I should prepare myself for?
Definitely prepare yourself for not a Oscar-winning, coming of age, emotional tearjerker. It is in the same vein as Dumb and Dumber. And I think the best way to sum it up was when we were shooting at the golf course, the GM of the golf course kids came down and watched this film, and they went to him the next day, and the GM sort of said, this is what my kids told me when they were filming yesterday. And I was kind of, I was impressed. Like, what did they think? They watched us filming this movie. And he said, they were like, Dad, it just looks like they're shooting Dumb and Dumber 3. Like, in a very like unimpressed like thing. But in our defense, I think the day that they were watching us film, we were trying to jump one of the golf carts onto the green, which again kind of just looks like a bunch of people having fun rather than actually kind of a story. But yeah, Dumb and Dumber 3 is probably your best elevator pitch.
Well, the reason I said that about getting naked was just a funny story that I had with director Joseph Culp. I don't know if you know the name. His father was the actor Robert Culp, who was pretty famous. He was in American TV show I Spy with Bill Cosby in the 60s. And he was.
I know the face you're talking about.
Okay.
If it's the person I'm thinking, I think they would have been around the 1930s or 40s when he was born, like an older generation.
Oh, Robert Culp? Yeah, probably, because he's passed away, and his son Joseph is now a director and has done several films. When he was on my show, he had a film that he was promoting called Welcome to the Men's Group, and I hadn't seen it, and I didn't even look at the cover of the film, the poster, right? So after we talked, and we did this thing, I watched the film. And the whole end section, everybody is totally naked. And I mean, full frontal, it's all guys. It's all rather not attractive guys, particularly like middle-aged guys, right? And everybody's naked. And it just was like, oh, I mean, I'm not a prude. It was just funny. And it was just kind of shocking because when you speak with somebody for a half an hour, and then you go and all of a sudden you're seeing all of it. It's just kind of like, oh, okay, So that's why I asked that. Plus, it's kind of a sex comedy type movie, right? Malibu Crush.
So it's in the same vein as kind of like, I would say, between American Pie and Dumb and Dumber. So it definitely has that young guys who are not, I guess, trying to take over the world, becoming corporate lawyers or entrepreneurs. They're more like intelligent level is, look, if I could just get a girl, then I'll be really happy.
Okay.
So their quest, and I mean the nice thing about shooting these sort of movies is, I mean, the way that I think is good to shoot it is you can kind of shoot the script, and then when you're in the edit, you can bring it down a little bit, like if you want. So I think our rating is only like it's like an M rating, but there is the option in the edit then if we wanted to kind of like edit it and bring it down to being more like a PG, you could say probably more slightly rom-com feel. That's the option as well. So that was also like something we were looking at.
Okay, well, you didn't answer my question. Are we going to see you naked in it or what?
Oh yeah, no.
No.
No. That would be a completely different film. We're trying to sell tickets here, Douglas. Yeah, we want people to watch it, the movie. So,
well, I look forward to watching it. It sounds funny. And what was the line? Oh, dry dick. Yeah. So that's
from the trailer. Yeah. That was again my immaturity in the writing, wanting to come out. And actually, I think as well, like some of the scenes from that scene, and if anyone's wondering what we're talking about, it's the very last frame on the trailer where there's an actress called Brittany Hockley and Dan Musel were the actors in the scene. They have a very interesting sort of relationship. They're dynamic sexually as characters. They're into some weird stuff.
Okay, so, I think we'll leave it at that. We don't want to give too much more away for people. Okay, well, listen, congratulations. I mean, the film looks like it's doing really well, and hopefully it'll continue on, and we'll see bigger and better.
Thank you very much.
I wanted just to touch on the film industry generally speaking. I think we started talking about this a little bit in the first interview, but how do you find navigating through this? Are you doing this all on your own in terms of the distribution and promotion? Because you didn't come through a PR company, which most of my guests come through some PR company that's pitching their movie or their book or their music or something. But you just kind of came in on your own. And so I was wondering, I mean, do you have a lot of support behind this film, or are you doing it all yourself?
So this was and it's a great question because I mean, this is like the unglamorous side of making a film. So, I mean, in my day job, I, produce more studio-driven stuff, and I have an acting manager, and I guess you could say that takes care of itself. But for this particular project, Malibu Crush, this was pretty much all me. It was sort of a passion project, and this is what happens when you have an independent film, because it's very much dependent on obviously one person driving it. the whole point of an indie film is you don't have a studio budget of like $35 million, and you can literally delegate everything from PAs to catering to camera hire. The opposite of that is, make your own film, and that means once you finish shooting it, you've got to be the one that's, doing post-production, driving, obviously, working with the editors. And to be honest with you, I've sort of loved the process more than I thought I would, just because there's a certain element of at least being able to make your own creative choices. In sort of the other films that I've done, and it definitely works, but, you obviously have a lot of different chefs in the kitchen, meaning a lot of people have different opinions. So when you make your own film, what goes with all the hard work is also the opportunity where you can say, hey, this is a really good, scene. I'm going to email the editor tonight and see how we can place this into the movie. And it's been rewarding and challenging and stressful and exciting, and all those things come into one.
Well, you also get to keep more of the profit too, the less fingers in the pie.
Well, that's the interesting thing as well, because I think you find too that the thing for me is that, my background is very firstly, I went to an acting school called NIDA, and you learn that being an actor is just so easy. It's just so easy. Like compared to, they pay you to turn up, they pay you to sit in the trailer, they set the entire shot up for you, they light it, they've hired the locations, and then you do your lines and you go home and you're not needed again. And then when the movie comes out, they say to you, oh, wow, you made this movie. Getting more behind the scenes and actually seeing what so many people do that, again, unless you make your own movie, often you're not aware, but, even just the way that the assistant editors, they'll be up, till 3, 4 in the morning, just basically ingesting the footage from the day before. That's a job in itself, and it's not glamorous, but it's so essential that you have people doing that as you're shooting. So probably to kind of sum it up is you can keep the profits if you're a good negotiator with distributors.
And I'm going to push back on one thing you said about it's so easy to be an actor. I think that might be true more for film. I don't hear people in the theater saying things like that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think the theater side of it, you really have to have your acting chops.
Yeah, you got to be right. You got to be on. You got to be on, and you got to be on for 2 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's actually there's a buddy of mine who's in the movie, Scott Miller, and he was telling me about a play he did in Vancouver, and it was 55 minutes, and it was all him. He did 4 nights in a row. And he's like, I had agents there trying to sign me because he did this just out of acting school. I had casting agents, and he's like, I literally had to be on pitch point every single night because I had someone invest in me and do a little bit of marketing about come and see this play. And he's kind of like, yeah, you tell me 55 minutes for a play with one person, you've got to drive it, have the energy. Exactly like you said. I think there's a real rare skill in that.
One of those, one-person shows, those are tough.
Yeah.
Those you really got to be good. And there's no retakes, and there's no, oh, gee, I just, don't feel like doing this tonight. That doesn't work. That doesn't work at all.
Yeah, exactly. There's no kind of like, near enough is good enough. This will make sense if I forget a few lines here and there. So, yeah, you've got to be on it.
So you want to tell us what the budget was for Malibu, or do you want to keep that a secret?
Well, it's definitely under 100,000.
Okay, well that's good enough.
Definitely under. Yeah. So how that kind of breaks down as well with usually with distribution deals in films is that you sign a distributor for different territories. So, for example, with Malibu Crush, we have Australia and New Zealand as one distributor, and then we have another distributor for the States and Canada. So
now,
and essentially.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, do you pay these people up front to distribute the film, or do they just take it and then they take a cut?
Well, that's opened up a great conversation because of that. That is the horror stories you hear about people making films.
Yeah, I've heard.
And without kind of like murking I guess, murking the waters, so people are getting confused what I'm talking about. But so when you make a film, you obviously you don't just turn up to, hypothetically, Netflix, knock on the door and say, "Hey, I'm a filmmaker. Here's my film." Generally, it's I suppose it's a little bit like selling a house. Private sales, people do them. Yes, they're not completely uncommon, but it's more of a professional transaction if you have somebody like a realtor selling your house on behalf of the owner. And that's essentially with, sales agents and distributors. Essentially, you sign with a distributor to distribute your film. They should have a network, whether it be Hulu, Netflix, Amazon. They should have their own network, which they can essentially sell on the film for you. So, a distributor shouldn't be taking money off you up front. You shouldn't have to pay for that. And the breakdown tends to be, for example, if they spend, $500,000 marketing your film, usually that's recouped first money out when the film lands somewhere. So hypothetically, you sign with the distributor X, they spend $500,000 on marketing the film. The film comes out, on Hulu, and Hulu buys it for $1 million. Well, straight away, $500,000 of that goes to the distributor in costs, and then it's a bit like a real estate transaction. Everything after that is kind of like split in a percentage that you've agreed on beforehand.
Right.
So,
okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I like to discuss this very same topic with people who are in other aspects of the entertainment industry, such as musicians, authors, and in my case, producing a podcast and a video show. We had a distributor for a while when I first started the video show, who we were paying every month to put the show out, and they said, "We're going to put you out on 110 different channels." Most of them I'd never heard of, and most of them nobody else had ever heard of, apparently. And we said, okay, all right. The fee for every month wasn't that ridiculous. It was $150 a month. So we thought, okay, well, let's give it a try. And what we found out was that, at least for us, because the theory was the more channels the show is on, the more people are going to see it. But that didn't work out because the market is so oversaturated. In theory, that should work. But these days, I don't think it really applies because the market is so oversaturated that we were getting, 2 and 3 views on 100 different channels. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be better to get 200 views on one channel? Because then that makes your stats look better, right?
I agree. That's a great example for the film industry too, because, for example, if you suddenly put your film up on YouTube, how many other videos are up on YouTube? Literally, millions and millions and millions. It's better to get a solid name behind you. Hulu, HBO Max,
right,
Netflix. If you're on the streaming route, rather than just try and put it on every single thing online you can.
It didn't make sense, and so we canceled the distributor. And we canceled most of them. In fact, the show now is only on 3 platforms. And it works out great because we're getting a lot more hits and views on each of the platforms than we were before. I think that people, with everything DIY and everything democratized, I think the whole game has changed. Or at least the rules. The game's the same. The rules have changed. And what used to work, I don't think works anymore. I think we touched on sponsorship, which is, good luck if you can find it. And there is no sort of, we were talking about this kind of social community where back in the old days when there were 3 channels on TV, you could talk to your friends and guaranteed they watched something that you watched the night before.
Right.
Because there was only 3 things to watch. Hey, did you see that on Channel 3? Yeah, wasn't that great? Okay. Now you'd be lucky to find anyone who watched the same thing you did except your wife or your girlfriend because you were sitting there at the same TV Okay.
Yeah, and maybe they didn't even want to watch it.
And they didn't even want to watch it,
the
right?
next year.
So it's like everybody is spread so thin because there's so much content out there that it just doesn't make any sense to even try to pursue sponsorship, because unless you've got 100,000 plus, you're not going to get anything. And I've found particularly with podcasts, is that every single podcast that is a huge success, they were famous already for doing something else. There isn't anybody who started from the ground up on a podcast and made a huge splash in this industry. I haven't found one. People say, oh, Joe Rogan. No. Joe Rogan was famous already before he even touched a podcast. He was already doing commentating on Fight Club. He was on that show Fear Factor. He was already known. People already knew him. People already saw him on TV. I see these celebrities like Alan Alda is doing a podcast now. What the hell is he doing?
Yeah.
This guy's an Oscar winner, and what is he doing?
No, well, I think where it all leans to, and you're absolutely right. It's so saturated, and I can speak more clearly for the film side, but where it all sort of comes down to is, if you have a product now, you have to spend money to make it stand out. Like you were talking about, if it gets picked up by, for example, you had it on a network station, people would watch it. Now there's such a smorgasbord of options for people, good and bad, that it's almost like if you have something, it's like you have to make sure that it stands out by paying more to get it somewhere or get it further ahead. And that, in the film industry, that's one of the things that I do think people are getting caught out at the moment. I've heard some real horror stories. Probably the worst horror story I heard was, someone who literally basically sold all they had, took 3 years off their life to make this film, put everything into it. At the very end, when they finished the edit, had a couple of options for distributors, and they went with this very slick-talking distributor that said, hey, if you take out a loan and you pay us, I think it was about $150,000. If you pay us $150,000, we're guaranteed we'll get it onto a streaming platform for you, meaning like a Netflix. So this guy took out a loan after having nothing through his parents and signed this ridiculous contract, which again, like it was dangled in front of him that, it'll be on Netflix if you sign with us. Didn't really look into what it was saying, which is like a 10-year contract. If you leave, any money we've spent, you have to pay us back. Anyway, cut a long story short, it never got on Netflix. These guys just stopped returning his call once he'd sort of transferred the money, and it was just basically false promises over email for about 6 months. And then it turned out the company wasn't even around. But it's that thing where it's like people get to the very end of whatever they've got, like a podcast, or they're a musician, their songs, whatever it is. It's not quite the same as just now it's going to land somewhere. There's still a bit of a murky or gray area in that distribution side, or it getting it out in front of people.
Let me ask you something. Let me just shift this a little bit. We talked about the democratization of all of this, music, film, writing, podcasting. Do you think that because it's become so much easier for people to do this, that a lot of people are wading into this business when they really have no business doing that? Like they shouldn't be, because they're ill prepared. They don't have the talent. They don't have the emotional investment that is needed to carry out in this crazy business. I mean, do you think it's like the road paved with gold to the golden city, and people are just going out of their minds because it's so easy? Because if you go back to well before the internet, it was inconceivable for most people to make a film. It's like, oh, I got to buy 35 millimeter film and a camera, and oh my God, most people couldn't even afford that. And with writers, okay, they could write all they want. That hasn't changed in 1,000 years. But you'd have to submit it to one of the big 5 publishing houses in New York, and unless you were solicited, it went straight in the bin. Right. 90% of what they got went straight in the bin. You had to be sort of spoken for and got in through the back door somehow with a connection. Music was the same thing. It took a lot of money to rent professional studio time. And I know this because I did it, even in the early 80s. We had to spend $75 an hour which was a lot of money in the 80s for starving musicians who were lucky to get a 25-cent box of macaroni and cheese to eat for the day. And we, we went in and we did our thing. Now, I mean, that same kind of studio you can fit in a closet that people, and people are recording all kinds of stuff in there. So going back to my question, I mean, do you think it's become too easy and people are getting disillusioned that, it's so easy, anybody can do it? Is that why the whole market is so saturated now?
Well, I think the goalposts have really changed in what is seen as entertainment. Like, I'll tell you a very quick story, which probably sums up. I was at a premiere a little while ago, and Nicole Kidman was there, and she got out of her car and walked up, and everyone was like, yay, and media loved her. But then, biggest cheer and the biggest sort of basically like. All the cameras on this odd-looking guy that was about 5'1" with a weird jacket, and I didn't recognize this guy to save my life. And I was kind of like, who is that guy? Because the photographers were all jamming on this guy. Like, they gave everyone about 30 seconds on the red carpet, but this guy was on there for like about 2 minutes. And I said, who is this guy? And they're like, he's got 50 million fans on YouTube. He juggles balls. And I was kind of perplexed because this was a studio that had put out this movie. It was this thing where it was like, that's what we're all going crazy for now. And, like the goalposts have been moved, I think, with what is actually entertainment. I think where it's also changed, and I think it's not all bad. I think it's great now that if you make a film and you make something good, you have options. You can go to Netflix or you can go to these stream. I think that's fantastic. But I think where people have forgotten in all the hype and the excitement of having, I guess, options is they've also realized that the quality has gone down. Like, if you look at how people watch movies now, they don't watch a movie often to be taken out of their world and enjoy it. They watch a movie because they're on Facebook or on Instagram at the same time, and they can't sit still, and they've also got music playing in the background. And once they're finished whatever is texting their friend on Instagram, they're going to go shopping online. And the movie is just something that plays in the background, whether it be on their tablet, their phone, or their computer. Whereas I think there is like a point where people don't want to watch a movie because it's an hour and a half. Often they're used to YouTube videos, which are all under, say, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So their concentration's changed as well. And I think that's where probably a little sad, because I've seen some incredible films come out and they've struggled to kind of get any traction once they've come out or they've hit like a platform. And I just think, I think a lot of people are perhaps valuing the guy that juggles balls on YouTube for 2 minutes more than they're valuing a filmmaker that's going into the middle of Kansas and shot a thriller about thunderstorms or something. So
right.
It's a different world.
I think you summed it up pretty well, because Nicole Kidman got a golf clap and this guy got a standing ovation. So
this guy got and then he got he got some real estate on that red carpet. Like, he was the guy that was. I mean,
that's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, but it's not unbelievable because of what I've seen out there. And you know what? It's really frustrating for me because podcasting is at the bottom end of that spectrum. At least, and here I'll make a defense for filmmakers. At least if you're going to try to make a film, you got to know something, right? You can't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to make a film. At the very least, you got to have a script. You got to know how to use a camera, and you got to know how to edit, which means you got to know how to use Adobe software. You got to have some lighting. You got to have some actors. You got to have something, some props, right? It takes a little bit more effort to put a film together, and in many cases, it takes a whole lot of work. As a musician, I don't think there's that many people that wake up one morning and say, I think I'm going to be a singer. Because that's like a God-given talent, and I think people are smart enough, although I've heard some real crappy stuff submitted to this show, and it's like, what are these people doing? But podcasting has no bar. You talk about the bar has been set low. This bar is on the floor, because
right.
The only thing people have to do is to be able to speak and have a computer, and they think, oh, I can do this. But people who are in the business professionally, who are broadcasters, who are presenters, as they say in England, probably in Australia too, right? They say presenter?
Yeah, presenter,
Yeah,
host.
okay.
Presenter.
Host. You know, there is a knack to it, but people think that it's just like, yeah, I can just talk and that's it. So it gets frustrating for the people that are trying to do it seriously. And I don't see an end in sight, with the exception of TikTok. And I was happy that TikTok came along for a very kind of selfish reason, because I figured, okay, maybe some of these podcast hacks, after 6 months, they'll realize there is a lot more work to this than they think. And they'll abandon the podcast and move to TikTok and just do these 1-minute stupid things. And that'll satisfy their need to display themselves to the rest of the world. And they'll leave podcasting alone. What do you think? Do you think do they have a chance with that one?
Well, I think TikTok kind of welcomes anybody, anyone, from someone that, shows off their car to someone that,
shows off their ass.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I think the thing that's really interesting for me with everything you said is, I think for anyone that wants to be, and this is a really positive thing too, but anyone that wants to be a director, wants to be an actor, wants to be a musician, and has that as their goal, there is a sense of I wouldn't say purity to it, but there's a sense of focus that they can cling to in a place like Hollywood. Because what I will say now, from my experience that I have in Hollywood, is you would go to LA, live in LA 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it's a little bit distracting for first-timers, meaning I'm an actor, I'm a director, I'm a dancer. Oh, my friend says I should be on Big Brother. Now I'm in reality TV. There was a lot of distractions. Now, for anyone that's kind of, let's hypothetically say moved out there or finished high school and says, hey, I want to be in the entertainment industry, I think it's so distracting because I'm an influencer, I'm a reality TV star, as you said, I'm a podcast host, I'm a dancer, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a director, and literally pulled in, triple the amount of places that you would have been pulled 5-6 years ago. So if you want to be a musician, you want to be an actor, you want to be a director, and that's what you want, I think you save yourself that little bit of a whirlwind that does happen now. And I've certainly noticed it as well. Like, in LA, I mean, there's people, and they're great people, but it's like I meet them 1 month and they're saying, yeah, I'm getting really focused, I'm going to film school. And then it's like 3 months later, I run into them and they're like, yeah, I've decided to become an influencer. And it's like 3 months later, it's like, oh, actually, my friend said I'd make a really good dancer in his music video. It's kind of the options have distracted people. And the word slasher, which people in the U.S. often put for multitasking different jobs, that's an understatement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And next week I'm going to be a golf pro.
Right.
Yeah, this was a conversation I had with my music producer, Stuart Epps. I don't know if you know his name, but he is an older gentleman who was Elton John's original producer with Gus Dudgeons, who produced like the first 10 Elton John albums back in the early 70s. In my opinion, like the best albums Elton John ever made. And him and I were talking about this, and he gets a lot of music submission. He's doing freelance production for people. And he said, the one thing that has changed, because he's seen it all from the late 60s to digital. And he said the one thing that's changed that he just cannot get his head wrapped around is that, exactly what you said, that everybody is doing everything. And he said people will submit to him and they'll say, I played the bass, I played the guitar, I played the drums, I played the piano, I sang all 25 pieces, I played the triangle, I wrote the song, I edited it, I mixed it, I mastered it. And his response to these people is, why? Why don't you just be great at one thing? Just concentrate on that rather than being mediocre at 20 things. And he says that's what he's finding. He's finding these people that he says there's a handful of people that can actually do all of it. I would say Paul McCartney is probably one. Stevie Wonder is probably another one. And there's a few other musicians that have pretty much done solo, where they could really just do everything.
Right.
Write the song and produce it and mix and master it, everything. Most people cannot. And for me, I can write a song, I can sing a song, I can play the piano, I can sort of play guitar. But as far as the mix and master and stuff, not a clue. So when I did my music, when I was active in it, Stuart did the work for me because I couldn't get around it. There's just no way. I would make a mix and then he would send it back and I'd be like, oh my God.
Well, I think the thing that I find is a great thing to kind of, if someone says to me, how do you be successful in the entertainment industry? I think you kind of, to go back to your question, is why do people do that? Or why they pulled in so many directions? And I think it's because they're looking for the path of least resistance to be famous. So
they don't care what they do. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, hypothetically I could study acting, but at the end of the day, if I was to suddenly get on a reality TV show like the Big Brother or whatever it is, then that's even easier to become famous. But I think a lot of people don't like to say, "Oh, I want to be famous." That's what they kind of want to hide behind. Well, I'm an artist, or I'm this and I'm that. And I do think that that's where to be successful, if you can identify what you really want, and if you want to be famous, like fantastic, like. You've identified that, then own it. You're going to go for the low-hanging fruit, like the reality TV stuff.
Or TikTok, and if you're young and sexy, you're dancing around in your underwear, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's when I think a lot of people have a meeting with someone, whether it be a talent manager or someone who's successful in their field, and they say, you know what, you would be really good as a you'd be really good as a model, or you'd be really good as a singer. And then that person drops everything they're doing and they say, right, that looks like the path of least resistance to be famous. Whereas I think if you have a little bit more background and say, hey, look, this is what I want to do, and so is this going to get me what I want? But it's a crazy industry out there right now.
Do you suppose this whole thing taken to the extreme is why some of these kids go off and shoot up a school with an AK-47 because they're instantly famous? Do you think the mindset has gotten so twisted that they've, you talked about the path of least resistance, and immediately they're on every news agency in the world?
Well, I do think that it's because I have a friend of mine who is a famous YouTuber, and he was telling me what it's really like and how much money you have, and he was explaining the whole setup to me, which is, you really don't make a lot of money being an influencer. You really don't. It's a very short shelf life because whatever specialty you are, hypothetically, you're a female and you're good looking. Hypothetically, the moment you get engaged to a guy, half your audience goes out the window type setup.
Right.
And it's, from my experience too, like there's not a lot of influencers that live in Beverly Hills mansions that have 5 Bentleys as their Instagram or TikTok says. It's very, very staged. And so I think there's, at some point, if you're living that false life online, let's say for the majority of the time, you're not sleeping, you're pretending to be someone else online. I think I don't think it's healthy long term to be always pretending this is who you are.
I think a lot of these kids just acted out to the point of no return, and they got so frustrated that they snapped. I'm not saying all of them. Others have had serious psychological problems, but I think there is an element of that, and you see more and more of these kind of like petty crimes where they're actually recording themselves beating people up on the street and sending it off on TikTok or Facebook or something like that. I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah. No, I agree, because I think that's where again, we go back to the bar, the goalposts are being moved.
Yeah.
What used to get you attention doesn't really make news on social media anymore. I came across this video. This blew my mind. I came across this video on YouTube, and I probably should have either saved the link, but it was this guy, and what he specializes in, he basically jumps off the highest residential, apartment buildings, the highest buildings he can into the pool without getting caught. And I kind of was looking at this, and this is where it was. I'll tell you where I'm going at the end of this. But basically, for example, this guy, he rocks up. He's got like a GoPro on his head, and he rocks up and he jumps the security gate, goes up the fire exit, goes to the rooftop of this apartment complex, which is about 6.5 stories high. It is really, really high. And basically, without looking, jumps off the top, goes into the pool, lands. As soon as he hits the pool, he's got the GoPro on still, kind of like comes out and quickly jumps the fence so no one can see him, and then runs off into the street. And then he's got like, how high it is. And it's just ridiculous what he does. I looked at how many views. This guy's done this about maybe 10, 15 different places. I looked at how many views. This guy's getting about like 245. I think one of them had 337 views. I don't know about you, but I mean, if 10 years ago, even footage of that, it would have made it onto the news, meaning, guy jumps off like, 30-meter building
right.
into, rooftop pool. This doesn't even sort of do a dent. And I mean, this guy hasn't been caught, and obviously I'd say he loves the adrenaline of it as well. But it's like right now, I think if you want to kind of stand out in that particular field, I think it's just going to be a downhill slope. Like you're just going to have to push it more and more and more and more.
Well, it's not an original concept. I mean, the guys from Jackass were doing this 30 years ago, right?
Right. That's true. Yeah.
So, okay, maybe he's just doing a little different, modern, updated version of Jackass, and he's doing it alone. But again, it goes back to what I was saying, where the guys from Jackass made a great success of that, all the way up to a Hollywood movie, right? I think they made a couple of them.
They did, yeah.
Yeah. But they put in the work. They put in the effort. They put in the time. They put in the investment. They didn't just turn their phone around and do a selfie or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? They really invested in this, and it paid off for them.
Well, that and in a sense as well, that kind of found its audience very fast, didn't it? Because like they realized what their audience liked.
And it was unique at the time. Nobody had done anything like that. Not really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think, I think the landscape's definitely changed a lot from, let's say making quality stuff or making stuff at a level and people recognizing talent to now, unfortunately, you can be, eating biscuits, or something, and that makes you an influencer because you fit 7 biscuits in your mouth at the same time, as opposed to the person that, has a fantastic, album or movie come out.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to reading Shakespeare. At least I feel comfortable there.
But look, I will say in disclaimer, then again, you watch Malibu Crush, and it's a dumb comedy, so.
No, but that's, you know what I mean? But it's a real movie. You didn't shoot this on your phone, right. And you didn't just decide to do, you had a script, you had a crew, right? You said you filmed it in where, Australia or L.A.?
Filmed in Australia and then a little bit in Santa Monica and Los Angeles.
All right, so you had to travel. You went on location. This is a proper film, A silly kind of comedy. Those have been around for a long time, and then they're great, when they're done well. I think everybody remembers American Pie was fabulously funny.
Yeah, I think it's a good time for comedy right now, too, just because I think people need a little bit more upbeat in their life or a little bit more of a release just with everything that's going on in the last couple of years. So
yeah, it's been pretty dreary the last few years. I think between COVID and the war in Ukraine and everything else. It's just, I don't put on the news anymore. If I hear of a story, I'll go look for it. Otherwise, I don't even put the news on anymore. It's just depressing.
I think that's the best. Well, I think that's the healthiest way to live right now. If you can sort of give yourself permission to zone out from that. It is a lot of clickbait as well, which is inclined to.
Yeah, and it's not really news. It's political opinion.
Inclined to get you either to click on another link or to get upset and write a comment on Twitter and take out your frustration. And that's not the best way to live.
James, I think on that we're going to wind this down. We had our rant. I'm exhausted. I don't know about you.
Well, I was going to say, Douglas, it's always fantastic talking to you, and I hope to talk to you again. And thank you very much.
Well, listen, you're always welcome on the show. Are you working on anything new? You gonna do a new film? I know it's just too soon after this one. You gotta take a little break and then start something else.
Starting shooting something next month, Passion Project, another film in the end of this year, which is still greenlit, ready to go. So I hopefully can talk a bit more about that towards the end of the year. But yeah, it looks like it's going to be a busy 3 months before the end of the year.
Well, great. Well, keep us in the loop, because I love talking to you. It's great. I like to talk about film, and you're a great guy. We can rant on about stuff. And I'm anxious to see your film. The trailer was great. So is it one of those where the trailer had all the best bits?
Yeah, like one of those like sales pitches where they show you the best car in the showroom.
Well, you know what I'm talking about, right? You've seen
absolutely
trailers of films where they show you all the best bits, and when you watch the film, it's like, I already saw all this.
Yeah, right. Well, you know what? I think the trailer is peeled back a little bit on the stupidity of it. So if anyone's watching the trailer, I think it's probably got a little bit more comedic elements to it. I think it holds up. I think the film holds up. I think the trailer we just used stuff that would piece the story together. Hence they go to Australia in search of a girl, and whereas I think once you watch the movie, you settle into a bit more of a buddy comedy. Put it this way: the opening scene, the character of Michael is spraying an old lady in the face with a fire extinguisher. He's pretending to be a veteran firefighter from Beverly Hills.
Well, that's funny right there. Just the visual of that's funny.
Yeah, and then the first time you see his best friend Dewey is kind of wearing one of those beer helmets on the couch, at like 11 o'clock in the day, just thinking about ordering pizza. So you kind of get the idea of guys are not really movers and shakers of the world.
Well, I'm anxious to watch it. Yeah,
right.
I'm definitely anxious to see it. So thank you again. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I think the best thing, if anyone wants to have a look at the movie, maybe just type in Google, and that will show you where you can watch it, whichever country you're in.
Okay.
Malibu Crush movie. Otherwise, IMDb, just type in Malibu Crush, and it'll come up on imdb.com.
Directed, starring, written, and produced by James Pratt, right?
That's exactly it, yeah. But not 4 paychecks, unfortunately.
It's only one film. Yeah, I know.
Only one.
All right, James. Always a pleasure. Best of luck. Take care.
Thank you so much, Douglas. Thanks again.